So if you're a city, if you're a state, you generate a substantial amount of revenue from property taxes. San Francisco's got $1 billion bogey in their budget. And again, it's not all because of office spaces, but again, their collections on property taxes down 50% from the peak because office values have plummeted. This can offset W-2. This can offset business income, short-term capital gains. There's no passive loss limitations on here, no income phase outs, no cap.
Fossil fuels will be around for a long, long time. There's just no way to meet all the energy needs with any other source. And you want to be careful when you're working with someone who is getting paid on things like oil and gas because they may oversell it.
Don't sell, to go to your beach house or to golf more. Like, you need to sell in order to, and have a line of sight to where you're going to build your community or find your community or rebuild a community.
What he likes to do on a first call with someone like that is he asks them for all their accomplishments. And then when they finish all of that, he says, wow, you've accomplished a lot. What has that cost you?
All right, Jim, welcome back.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. I'm excited. We got a good docket here today. We're going to talk through what's going on in the office space in terms of, from a real estate perspective and investment perspective, some headwinds. Headwinds. That's a good word
headwinds. There. Those are the winds that come at you that slow you down.
Yep.
Tailwinds are good. They make you go faster.
Tailwinds are good.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember actually being in the corporate world, and I remember they talk, headwinds, tailwinds. They talk about that. And I remember actually asking, my boss was like, can you explain this to me? Like, what are they talking about? And he's just like, imagine you're in a plane. Headwinds are bad. They slow you down. Tailwinds are good. They make you go faster. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've come a long way.
And by the way, you saying that, just as on a serious note, I think a lot of times when people are talking with others, especially about finance, they use terminology that people just don't understand.
Sure.
And you had the courage, even at Intel, to go, what the heck does this mean?
Yeah.
And I would just encourage anyone, if you don't know what someone's talking about, it's okay to ask them what they mean. I do it with AI all the time, and then you make fun of me for being old and stupid, but I can take it. I don't mind.
Yeah, you type into AI. What is AI?
How do you spell AI?
All right, so we're going to talk through office space, what's going on in the market there, oil and gas working interest, how to not only the tax benefits, which are outstanding, but also how to stack different vintages to diversify. And we're going to do a case study. And then we're going to jump into Harvard's 85-year happiness study. It revealed some really cool things, and I think there's a lot of application for wealthy entrepreneurs, especially those post-liquidity event who sell their business, who really are struggling to figure out their why, and then dovetail that into what we call Make Rich Real, right? The framework that you and Mimi have come up with, I think is really cool of connecting, well, what is this all about? What is this wealth even all about? So let's start off with the briefing room. That's going to be our first segment here. And the office market isn't recovering like past downturns. And I think we all know why, but it's undergoing a permanent structural transformation right now. Vacancy rates are up over 20%. There's about $1 trillion of commercial real estate debt rolling off the books. AI is changing the way we work, eliminating jobs potentially. So not your dad's real estate cycle. So first chart up we're going to show here is U.S. office vacancy rate. So this is one measurement of this from CoStar. This doesn't show as bad as 20%. This is more across the United States at 14%. Some metros are doing a lot better than others. But as you see this chart up and to the right, and that's an office vacancy rate, not the kind of chart you want to see go up and to the right.
Yeah, what's interesting is obviously during COVID, there's obvious reasons why the vacancy rate went up, and that kind of flattened, but then it went up again, which shows that maybe we have more than just a cycle, as you said.
Yeah, and I think this time is different. Is that the question? Because as you go back, you have the 08-09 crisis, so vacancies went up because a lot of companies were literally going out of business, or they're just cutting any expense they could. So the economy recovered, then people fly back to the offices, and so that was kind of the traditional playbook. Now, the economy's been growing since we've come out of COVID, but the remote and hybrid work isn't temporary. I know we're in that bucket that, we're a virtual company, and even for our local team, it's completely optional if and when you want to come into the office. And so one stat here from HQO data is that over 50% of white collar workers now lack an assigned desk. So that means that half of all of them, they may be able to go into an office space, but it's just a flex office space, right? You just plug your laptop down and you get to work. And then the last thing, and I'll get your thoughts here, is the debt maturity wall. So chart up on this one, this says office delinquency rate for mortgages converted into commercial mortgage-backed securities. So really high mountains here is bad. And you can see we had high mountains coming out of the 08-09 financial crisis. Things were looking really good. And then mountains coming out of COVID. And this, again, is just those who have been lending money to office space builders and developers struggling here. So almost $1 trillion of exposure.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of headwind, as we said earlier, to the office vacancy rate, everything else. There are problems there. I think going forward, I don't think we're going to go back. I think there's going to be this working remote thing because the technology supports it. A lot of people prefer it. And to be in a job market to get talent, I think it's one of the ways you can attract talent. I think to increase or decrease vacancies, improve the whole office thing, it's going to take some creativity. And that's what we see like with Jamie Dimon, where he's requiring all his employees to come back to the $3 billion building in Manhattan that he built. But if you look at that building, there's incredible amenities. There's things that you can't get working out of your house. And I think that's going to be the game for employers, is attracting people back rather than requiring them to come back. Now, I know Jamie said they have to come back, and that's part of it. But I bet a lot of those employees who come back because it's mandated will actually find themselves happy that they did. But doing the old office space where people have to come in and work out of an office, I believe that ship has sailed and is not coming back.
Yeah, you are spot on. And there's actually data here that I have that shows that prime offices, which are called Class A offices, like that's what we've got, the vacancy is 5% below market average versus Class B or C. So the market is bifurcating. If you've got really nice office space, you need to have the amenities. And like you said, you need to attract talent back. And I know we've talked about, it's like we can't wait for our lease to get rolled off. We got our office sitting about 60% empty on most days. And I can't wait to give it back. And then, maybe we get a really cool flex co-working space that's got a lot of amenities, save some money. And those who want to come in can come in whenever they want, And I think that even as I see the future of our business, I see kind of the same stuff we're seeing in the data here.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of what happened with student housing a few years ago, where you had the old dorms like where I stayed when I was in college, and no one wants to stay there because they built up these new places that have amenities. They have a coffee shop, they have a pool, they have a workout facility, all the stuff that you didn't get in the old dorms. And even though they're more expensive, that has been where students want to stay. And I think we're going to see something similar in the office market, is more amenities, more things that attract employees to want to work in the office instead of work from home.
Yep, makes sense. And I think AI, we talked about that, and we got another screenshot here of Amazon targets as many as 30,000 corporate job cuts. So there's uncertainty of what AI is going to do in terms of actual headcount. And a lot of these companies like Walmart, I know, is trying to not really grow their headcount exposure. So that is more headwinds, I should say, for the office space. And some downstream ramifications that's interesting here is the municipal budget. So if you're a city, if you're a state, you generate a substantial amount of revenue from property taxes. And property taxes is based off the fair market value of that office space. So San Francisco, their values are down 50% from the peak. And so San Francisco's got $1 billion bogey in their budget. And again, it's not all because of office spaces, but again, their collections on property taxes down 50% from the peak because office values have plummeted. And then just recently, Washington, D.C., they came out with their budget. They got just under $101 billion of revenue from property taxes last year, and their budget now is predicting $93 billion. So they're going to take about a 7% haircut, and that's just probably the beginning. But translating that to dollars, again, $7 billion now gone from Washington, D.C.'s budget just because of commercial property values declining. And if this doesn't stop, it's going to have a lot of downstream ramifications.
Yeah,
there.
Luckily, San Francisco and D.C. are really good with their finances. They're really smart how they handle things.
Yeah, just like I would say that for probably every single city. So
yeah,
I think for business owners, as an investors, I think it's important to think through, what is your exposure, or if you're looking at investing in commercial real estate, if you're going to do a B project or a C project, there better be line of sight to making that an A project. And I know locally here, there's the Bond building. I don't know if you've been down there off of, I think it's like 24th or 32nd and Camelback, but they completely redid it. They have a spa in there, high end. They got a restaurant. They got a high end gym. It's beautiful. And they completely gutted it. I'm sure they put tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars in there, but now it is, I think, one of the highest per square foot rents in the valley because they've done such a good job flipping that into a high Class A property.
Yeah, I think the other thing is they're going to have to start trying to figure out how they can use office space for multiple different things, not just for office space. Flex spaces and event spaces and other things like that. I think they're going to have to use those buildings for more than just traditional office space if they're going to fill them.
Yep. All right. Well, let's transition here. So office real estate's definitely facing some structural headwinds, but a lot of people liked real estate, especially as an asset class, long-term appreciation, cash flow, and very tax efficient. And that's going to dovetail us into another good investment here that provides a lot of the same benefits. And it's oil and gas working interest. And so this is kind of, I'd say, not talked about nearly as much as real estate. And it's not as big as real estate from a total addressable market perspective. But for those entrepreneurs making over $1 million a year of taxable income, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes per year, then the oil and gas may be something they want to explore. So what are your thoughts on oil and gas overall? And then I'll break down the Internal Revenue Code, the tax benefits, and then kind of some examples of how investing in oil and gas working interest works.
Yeah, a couple of things that are great about oil and gas that you're going to get into some of the weeds and the details on is the tax benefits, because you can use write-offs and offset ordinary income, W-2 income, and a lot of investments may create tax benefits, but you can't use it against active income.
Yep.
And that's a huge part of oil and gas. It's going to be around. If anyone asks, fossil fuels will be around for a long, long time. There's just no way to meet all the energy needs with any other source. And obviously there's other sources that will come online over the next, 3, 4, 5 decades. But fossil fuels and oil and gas is still going to be an integral part of energy in the world for a long, long time. What I would say about oil and gas, and we'll get into this a little bit too, is not letting the tax tail wag the dog, because just like QOZs that we talked about on a previous call, if you look at all the tax benefits and you put money in a QOZ that turns out to be a bad investment, then it doesn't matter. The tax benefits you will forget if you lose your money for a bad investment. Same thing's true in oil and gas.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's frame this up from a tax perspective, and then we'll go into the return profile and the commodity risk and how it performs. So Section 469 of the tax code is really what bifurcates active versus passive. And normally, if you're making a passive investment in something like oil and gas, and this is true for real estate or other assets, you can't take any losses to offset non-passive income, essentially. But 469C3 specifically carves out or makes working interest in oil and gas exempt from this rule. Now, the requirement is and this is little known, but the investor must be a general partner or have unlimited liability to claim the deduction. So that is one downside, is you must have liability exposure. And we're going to talk around how you would want to get around that. And really, just at a high level, you would want to do that by being a general partner in the fund, which means you have unlimited liability for 12 to 18 months until you capitalize and get a lot of these different IDCs or intangible drilling cost deductions. And then you can flip to a limited partner afterwards. So a lot of the funds that we're looking at will have that built in. So again, 469C3 is the section of the Internal Revenue Code that essentially says, okay, if you invest in oil and gas wells, despite not being an expert or not doing that and materially participating, you can take these losses to offset your other income. So that's the first building block. The next building block is underneath Section 263C, and this is what allows working interest owners to deduct something called intangible drilling costs, or IDCs, in the year incurred. So think of this as like labor, fuel, chemicals, drilling mud, site prep, all of that kind of stuff that has no salvage value. You can write all of that off in the year that is incurred. You don't have to write it off over time. And typically this is going to be 70 to 80% of your cost. So again, that said another way, if you put in $100,000 and your IDC percentage is 75%, that's a $75,000 tax deduction in year one. At a 35% tax bracket, that's going to be worth $26,250. So my real amount at risk is the difference of $100,000 cash invested minus $26,250 of tax savings. $73,750 is my net basis at risk here. So that is the juice on the front end from a tax perspective. Help clean that up. What did I miss there?
No, I think that's exactly right. And in addition to that, you want to make sure that it's a good investment, as I said. I remember one time many years ago, we were sitting around a group of friends and we asked, what was your best investment ever? And one of the guys said that he used to have a cocaine habit, and he was at Bobby McGee's restaurant, which used to be here in the Phoenix area, doing cocaine, and this guy pitched him on an oil and gas deal. He forgot all about it, that he had signed up and that he wrote this guy a check or something, gave the guy money. And he said that he was still, and this was like 20 years later, he was still getting checks every month from this oil and gas deal. So that's not to say that when you're high on cocaine, you should be doing oil and gas deals. But the point being that he got so lucky, because when you invest, he invested in a single oil well. And when you invest in a single oil well, if that thing's dry, you lose 100% of your money. And if that thing flows, you could have what happened to this guy, which was by sheer luck. So make sure that you're diversifying within oil and gas. And the other thing I see in oil and gas is sometimes people get pitched these, like I have this magic way of finding where the oil is, and then I flip it and sell it to these oil producers for a multiple, and you're going to have this huge return. Just like in QOZs, I like dependable, reliable, experienced operators who've been running oil and gas as a real business for a long time, not startups, not people who are doing some cute, clever thing with oil and gas. Stick with the reliable, predictable, experienced operators.
Yep, I can't agree more. And just to hammer that tax benefit home, right, as we're talking about these IDC deductions, this can offset W-2. This can offset business income, short-term capital gains. There's no passive loss limitations on here, no income phase outs, no cap. And so we got a quick chart that we're going to put up here that just shows that intangible drilling costs and the oil and gas working interest of the year one deduction, and compare that against real estate. If you buy if you buy a residence, you depreciate that or write that off over 27 and a half years. That's a 3.6% per year deduction versus, again, 70 to 80% intangible drilling cost deduction year one for oil and gas.
What about like cost segs and stuff like that? How would you throw that in there?
Yeah, cost segs, it depends on if it's a personal kind of a residence or if it's a commercial, but you're going to be usually 20 to 30% or so. So, if you're cost segging, then you're going to be at 20 to 30% instead of the 70 to 80% here.
Yeah, makes
Definitely
sense.
juices more. The other benefit, though, is you also have, kind of similar to depreciation, you have depletion. And so there's a safe harbor depletion in section 613 of the code. And really what that says is anybody who's an investor can take a depletion deduction for 15% on the gross income from the well. So if this well, let's say, produces $10,000 a year of income, right, from the royalties that's spitting off to me, I only have to claim as taxable 85% of that, or 1 minus the 15%. So that would save me, some more taxes there. So it's kind of like depreciation in real estate, but it's called depletion when it comes to oil and gas. So not only do you get that huge upfront deduction, you also get this annual depletion deduction that you get to take out of any of the income that's coming out.
Yeah, one other thing on oil and gas, many times these are sold by people who have broker dealers or broker relationships, and they get spiffed money up front. And I usually see 6 or 7% of the capital put in. So you put $200,000 into an oil and gas deal, and your advisor made $14,000 that you don't see that goes through the broker dealer. And the only reason I mention that is incentives are critically important when you're making decisions, and you want to be careful when you're working with someone who is getting paid on things like oil and gas, because they may oversell it the way we sometimes talk about life insurance salesmen oversell it because they make really nice commissions. Same thing with oil and gas. Sometimes that gets oversold, and you might have an advisor who could get 1% from a portfolio, or they could get 7% up front. They're getting 7 years of payments on day one by redirecting some of the capital into oil and gas. So just be aware of that out there.
Yeah, and that's a great dovetail into the next chart that we're going to put up here, which is a comparison of different risk factors and mitigators. And so here we're going to just break down commodity price exposure, operational exposure, liquidity, fee structure. You talked about that. That's a big thing you want to consider. Tax law, and then the GP liability. Again, a big thing to note here is that when you're investing in these working interests, you cannot own them in LLCs, domestic asset protection trusts, or any type of creditor protected vehicle, because if you do not have that exposure of the unlimited liability, then you cannot take those losses to offset your non-passive income. You can still take the losses, you'll just be able to only offset passive income. So that's really what unlocks this. And so you can see here that the GP liability, now generally, unless there's different fund structures here, but you're going to want to make sure you've got liability protection, umbrella policy, and you're going to want to make sure that within the actual subdocs and the private placement memorandum and the operating agreement, you can convert from a GP to an LP after you get all those working interests rocking and rolling, you take those tax deductions. And so that way, when you flip to an LP, you now no longer have that unlimited that unlimited exposure. So again, big caveat from a tax perspective, you must have this unlimited liability to take the losses to offset non-passive income. A lot of people miss that. So make sure you have a lot of insurance, or that the fund has a lot of insurance to protect the GPs, right, in case there is a lawsuit. And then make sure you then do convert yourself to an LP once you've squeezed all of the tax juice out of it. So then that way you can just collect your passive royalties.
And what you just said is so good, Bryce, because I don't hear people talking about that when they talk about oil and gas. And Mimi and I, as you know, are invested in oil and gas. We actually got a distribution yesterday from our oil and gas, which
Your first distribution?
No.
Oh,
it's been regular.
That's good.
It's been good.
That's good. Yeah.
I like our oil and gas investments. I will say though that we don't need the income right now. We're just accumulating for the future. So I always have mixed feelings when I get any kind of distribution. I don't really need it, but it's nice to know that it's doing well and they're paying some people out.
Yeah, that is always good. And I think the important thing, like you said, there's not just the tax tail wagging the dog, but also making sure that you're diversified in different oil fields. You want to make sure that that's important. You're understanding at what commodity price in terms of where is oil and gas in terms of the shale or whatever it may be that it's producing. What is the commodity price there? What's the break even based off of the economics of the specific fund and where they're drilling and what's going on there? And then also, I think from a portfolio construction, right-sizing the allocation within your portfolio. And so I know when we look at commodities, which this would fall in kind of that commodity or that real asset section within the billionaire's allocation, we normally see between 3 to 10% in this holistic asset class. That includes mostly oil and gas. It may include infrastructure. It may include timber, agriculture, farmland, etc. So I think from a right-sizing of a portfolio.
Gold and silver.
Yep, exactly. And even crypto now, we're seeing kind of from that allocation. So again, it depends on your risk tolerance, what you're looking for, but a nice uncorrelated income stream with some heavy tax benefits. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk through the actual application here. And so it's going to be a case study. And this is going to be here, let's call this entrepreneur Marcus. So Marcus sold a SaaS business for $25 million after taxes. He's generating $2 million annually in ordinary income, board seat, real estate, consulting, etc., paying $700,000 a year in taxes. And so Marcus wants to build out over time a 5% position of his, and so 20 out of his $25 million is liquid. And so he wants to build a 5% position of that $20 million, which is a $1 million allocation to oil and gas. Attracted to the uncorrelated income stream, attracted to the tax benefits, and everything that comes with it. So instead of just writing a check for $100,000, what would be optimal here is building out what I would call an oil and gas ladder. And what this would do is give you different vintages. And what I mean by vintages is every year you're making a different investment in an oil and gas investment. You want to be diversified within that bucket of which providers, which drillers, et cetera, are you investing in, but also you want time diversification because the price of crude and the price of the underlying commodity is going to ebb and flow over time. And so the value and the production of these wells is going to ebb and flow based off of that commodity price. And so here we're going to show a visual that just shows, let's assume you go back to 2024. Let's assume that's when Marcus started making his first investment. You can see here he's got an investment for $100,000 a year for 10 years. So 10 years times $100,000, that's $1 million of investments. If we assume 75% intangible drilling costs up front, that means he gets a $75,000 tax deduction per year. At a 40% tax rate, that means he's saving $30,000 per year or $300,000 in taxes over the 10 years. And then you can see his net cost really is $700,000 or so. So that's his basis. So again, kind of we talk about building maybe a bond ladder, building different income ladders. It's really smart to do that to get access to different vintages within oil and gas. And is this something that, as you and Mimi are allocating capital to, are diversifying your vintages too?
Yeah, most definitely. To me, I think of, because the term vintage is wine, because you may have one winemaker and they may have an incredible 2019 and maybe their 2020 isn't nearly as good. And so what do? They have all these different vintages to diversify based on when the grapes were good, whether the weather was good for that type of grape or whatever they're creating. And then, of course, you have the winemaker. So similar to oil and gas, you have each year there's a different price of oil, there's a different environment, there's a different geopolitical situation. And then based on that, you may have an average provider but have a great year just because everything was really accommodating for a good year in oil and gas. So that's why you want to have a great operator, but also, as you said, diversify across vintages the same way you would with buying wine.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. And in this example, for some of these funds that we like, each investment's going to be deployed into maybe 10 to 20 different wells. So each $100,000 investment that Marcus is making is getting deployed into 10 to 20 different wells. So now you do 10 vintages times, let's just say 15 wells per vintage. Now we got 150 wells that we're drilling. And so this also just is more diversification within the asset class, that instead of, hey, what if 5 of these wells are a goose egg and I'm only in 1 year? It's like, sorry, you just chose a bad vintage. Whereas again, if you're diversifying over these different times, you're just diluting the probability of striking out a lot from the oil and gas perspective.
In a way, it's a little bit like dollar cost averaging in the stock market, right? Because you don't know today the price you're buying, will this in 5 years look like it was a high price or a low price?
Right.
But if you're doing that every single year, it works itself out.
Yep. And same with the commodity price timing, right? Because if our break even is, let's say, $40 a barrel, and we know, okay, we're getting into this vintage now, and it's maybe right now it's $60 a barrel. So we got some nice buffer. But remember, it takes a little bit of time to go from deployment of capital. They got to build out, they got to incur all this intangible drilling costs. Usually you're going to see 12, 18 months maybe before that well's really cranking. And what if you get into a huge recession? So that money you deployed 12 to 18 months ago, now maybe the price per barrel is at $45. Like there's barely even juice above your break-even period.
Yeah.
But the same thing could be said of the money you invested in that recession doesn't really get deployed or start really spitting out income until 12, 18 months down the road. If the economy's back and crushing it, price of crude's back up to $80 a barrel, you're glad you wrote that check in the recession there, because now by the time it's printing money or producing oil, things have rebounded. So there's a time lag that's really important as well as part of this.
Yeah, and I think overall in investing, consistency is really important, because I think often entrepreneurs they're overconfident in their ability to know where things are in the cycle and whether things are going to go up or down from here. And if you're not sure, have a great allocation and just consistently invest over time, and you're going to win more than you're going to lose.
Yep. And as just to educate those who have not invested in oil and gas, as a rule of thumb, the first 6 months, maybe up to the first 12 months, there's no income. That's when you're drilling and there's just the completion. And then around, maybe months 6 through month 18, you're going to have first production. So the spigot's just getting turned on and you're just starting to kind of get some income out. Around years 2, 3, 4, rule of thumb, you're going to have peak production. So that's really where you're hitting all the easy, oil, you're getting all that out of the ground, your highest distributions. And then as you have to kind of dig deeper or maybe go more horizontal, years 4, 5 through up to years 20, like you gave the case study. I mean, some of these wells do produce for like up to 20 years. That's where you could have like a gradual decline, but this income could have a very far fat tail, so to speak. So if you look at it at a bell curve, you could get a lot of money over a long period of time. And again, the dollar amounts you get is going to decline over time, but some of these wells could produce for decades, which it's, again, not guaranteed, but just depends on what the wells are and how successful they are.
And that's kind of the pattern we've seen. Plus our dog Abby has a fat tail, so I like to think of that too.
So we're going to go to the next visual here of, let's just take a snapshot at Marcus's hypothetical portfolio here at year 5. So we're 5 years in, 5 vintages, $500,000 deployed. After the tax savings, $350 is his net cash out. And you can see we've outlined, hey, each vintage, what year is it in, where is that in the production phase, and what could a hypothetical monthly cash flow look like, on a $100,000 investment. So this is kind of an idea of how you can see the vintages are stacking these different monthly cash flows, right, to be different amounts. And as you're rolling on and off new vintages, that income will ebb and flow. But again, it gives you more further diversification.
Right.
And then next chart we're going to show is just overlapping vintage production curves, just the same data, just reframed a different way. And again, you'd have more and more vintages coming online, but it just shows that you kind of start at 0, you hit your peak production, and then you're going to have the fat tail. Now, how long is that fat tail? It really depends. No one knows, but it could be a few years, it could be decades. And that's just part of why diversifying within the oil and gas asset class is so important.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, so that's it on Marcus, who did a good job building out these different vintages and getting some well diversified in oil and gas. And now what I want to do is switch gears here, Jim, and talk about the Harvard Happiness Study.
By the way, did you think we'd be on a podcast about finances and I'd slip in the word cocaine?
Yeah, no, it was interesting. And the interesting part about that story to me was that the best investment he ever made. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then the preamble was about him doing cocaine at Bobby McGee's, which I remember being barbecue where you just get dressed up, if that's correct. I had some...
the servers were all dressed up.
Yes.
Mimi actually was a cocktail waitress at Bobby McGee's in Tucson when we met. And she had a bunch of different characters she played, which I won't say on the air because she might not appreciate some of the characters she had to play down there. But yeah, he had, by the way, by the time he had this conversation, he was clean and sober, but he had a cocaine habit back in the 80s, and that was when he made his best investment.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's unusual to say the least. Like usually people make their best investment once they're older and they have some experience, and not when they're doing drugs in a bar somewhere.
Not on the influence, yes. Yeah. Your investment policy statement generally should not start with first you get high.
Right. Cocaine, then invest money. No, that's usually not a good and by the way, usually cocaine makes people broke.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive vice.
From what I hear, it's not a good use of your dollars.
All right, so we talked about business owner, building the wealth, using oil and gas, diversifying, creating liquidity, creating income. But one thing that we're seeing here is entrepreneurs who nail that wealth building phase, but really struggle with the what's next phase after having that liquidity event from their business. And that ties into this Harvard happiness study. So we're going to show a visual here that shows the 8 surprising truths from Harvard's 85-year study on happiness. Again, 85 years, which is crazy. And let's go ahead and break these 8 down real quick. And so we'll start with number 1, but the biggest takeaway really was that loneliness harms your health. And the anecdote here was that they were drawing the parallels to it as much as smoking. So being alone is as damaging to your health as smoking, the equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day, which is crazy
Shocking
to think about.
And, unfortunately, I believe the trend is in the negative direction here because of social media and tablets and phones. Someone can sit in their house and act like they have something going on when they're really lonely. And they've shown people who are scrolling constantly on social media are much more lonely than people who are actually seeing other people in the home and outside of the home. So it doesn't surprise me, but wow, to compare that to smoking, it's a big deal.
Well, smoking 15 cigarettes a day, that's a lot. And I think we see this a lot with entrepreneurs who, sold the company, lost the mission, they lost the team interactions, the identity. That's the biggest thing. And so that's a big issue here, is that loneliness can really creep in. And so I think a thing for an entrepreneur to think through if they're about to sell their business is don't sell, to go to your beach house or to golf more. Like, you need to sell in order to, and have a line of sight to where are you going to build your community or find your community or rebuild a community. So boards, advisory roles, masterminds, making sure you stay engaged in something is important, because they all say, oh, let's go golf, or I'm going to go hang out with the grandkids, or whatever it is. But then it's like, well, okay, that sounds good. What are you going to do starting in month 2?
Yeah, that's a big issue for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think it's tempting as an entrepreneur to see that vision and think, oh, I would just love not doing any. I mean, sometimes I tell Mimi, I look at Abby laying around the house and I say, if I could just be her for a couple weeks. The reality, though, is that doesn't make you happy. It's some of these other things that we're talking about is really what makes you happy, not sitting on the beach all day and doing nothing.
Yep, spot on. All right, number 2. Quality relationships matter, not the number. And so the anecdote here was that relationship quality, so not quantity, but relationship quality at age 50 is a better predictor of your health outcomes at age 80 than your cholesterol level.
Wow.
So again, it's about quality, not quantity. And I think the anecdote, if you're an entrepreneur, is you probably have 10, 50, 100,000 maybe followers on LinkedIn or Instagram, but maybe there's 1 person, 2 people, or maybe 3 people max that you can call at 2 a.m. when you have a problem, right? And it's like, who, if anyone, can you call at 2 a.m.? That's what matters, not the 10,000 LinkedIn followers you've got.
Yeah, and they say that ideally you should have at least 1 or 2 close friends outside of your marriage, but having a strong marriage also is dramatic in its health benefits. And I know, being married to Mimi for 33 years, I know this is great for my health, and as long as she doesn't kill me, I think I can live longer because of the marriage.
Yep. And this feeds into number 3, which is introverts can thrive here because you only need a few very close relationships. That, like, an introvert doesn't have to think, oh man, this is stacked against me. It's not about the quantity again. And so here, I think a few close supportive relationships, having a great spouse, is the same amount of benefits as, an extrovert who may have a larger network. So really just focusing on deepening 3 to 5 key relationships instead of expanding, going deeper. So breadth instead of depth. No, depth instead of breadth.
Yes.
That's more important.
Arthur Brooks, who I like to follow, and he talks about deal friends versus real friends. Mm-hmm. And a lot of entrepreneurs end up with a bunch of deal friends, people they do business with and all that kind of stuff. And you need some real friends. And real friends are ones that are wonderfully useless to you, meaning that I have some friends that I've been friends with for 40 years, and they're wonderfully useless to me and me to them. We don't do business together. We have different things that we do, but we love each other. We have an incredible connection and a history together. And that's a different feeling when I leave time with those friends than when I leave time with deal friends, people that there's a business relationship. It's just different. So I just say, make sure you don't just have deal friends. You have some real friends in your life too.
Yep. All right. Number 4, use social media wisely. And so this is something that I think is a huge contributor to why we have so many mental health issues in our society today, is the proliferation of social media. And so when there's active engagement in social media, messaging friends, organizing meetups, like it can be used as a positive tool. And I think that was the original design. But I think in reality, there's a lot of passive consumption. There's doom scrolling. There's comparing, on Instagram of all the different vacations or trips. And for those entrepreneurs that have sold their business, they're looking on LinkedIn and they're thinking like, man, they're comparing, everyone's building, I don't have anything I'm working on, or I'm on vacation or whatever it may be. And it's like everyone puts a perception out there that they're winning, and in reality, everyone is struggling. And I think we know that in order to build a successful business, it takes a lot of struggling to build something successful. But social media would make it think that, hey, everyone deserves to have that, and that everyone is happy and not doesn't have any friction in their life.
Yeah, it's no different than things like when I was a kid, television. You could sit and watch television all day, but our parents wouldn't let us sit and watch television all day. And it's not healthy. It's not good. I am almost never on social media. And if you're listening to this and you've tried to friend me on Facebook, or if you tried to connect on LinkedIn, there's probably an invite sitting there that's never been responded to. And I apologize for that. And I know there's value to social media, and I know that we use more and more social media in our company. But for me personally, I haven't missed out on anything. I have a brother that I'm very close with, and he likes to be on social media. And I asked him, well, what am I missing? And he said, well, what if there's something that happens with somebody that you care about? I go, well, somebody will let me know if it's somebody that I know and I care about. But a lot of the stuff, the times I have going on, it just seems like a waste of time. And there's also this positioning and this comparative thing that I don't think is healthy. And then often there's this people arguing and trolling each other over stuff. And that also I don't feel is valuable. And I know anytime I've had stuff go on social media, I never look at the comments, because I figure if there's someone trolling me and saying mean, horrible things, I could do without hearing that. And then if people are telling me that I'm the most incredible, amazing person they've ever met, they don't know me, I don't want to hear that either. I already have a big enough ego, so I don't need any more of that. So I stay away from social media, and I'm worried more about younger generations, because it wasn't something that I grew up with, so that I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And it's not like my friends are talking about all the stuff that's going on where I feel like I should be on there.
Yeah, as dovetailing this into parenthood, my wife and I were reading Raising Mentally Strong Children, since we have a young family, as you know, and some of the statistics, especially around teenage girls, is horrifying in terms of the body image problems, the suicide thoughts, and the huge increase in terms of the probability that a female is going to have those negative thoughts is astronomically higher than you would think. And again, it's hard to pin it on one thing, but I think Instagram and body issues and social media, I would say, is a very clear culprit, if you were to ask me about that. And
yeah,
so
I know we could talk a lot about this. One thing that I always find disturbing is when I see a family out to dinner at a restaurant. I think, what great opportunity to share things and to communicate and have connection. And often every kid is on their phone playing a game or doing something like that, and the parents are just talking. And to me, it's like, why would you have a device at an opportunity to go out to, they're on the device at home. That's such an opportunity to share and also to develop the social skills of those young people, and they're missing out. So if I see you doing that with your boys, I will take their phones away.
Well, luckily they're too young to do that, but yes, and I don't want to pass judgment, because who knows, I may be that person in the future. I hope not, but yes. All right, number 5 here in this study is purpose motivates. And I think this is going back to those entrepreneurs who sell, who have that liquidity event, right? You need to have that purpose. And so I think like the entrepreneur crisis here is, hey, I spent 15, 25 years building this company, and it was my purpose. Like, that was why I got out of bed every single day. And so there's 3 different paths that we kind of see. There's the first, which is maybe the serial entrepreneur. They sell their business. They've already got, idea number 2 and 3 lined up here. And it could work if they're really passionate about that. But there's also a risk that you're jumping too quickly, without the reflection, without the downtime, without the healing, and that I think is important, or a little bit of a sabbatical. The second path we see a lot is the fractional operator. So someone who wants to sit on boards, advise, do advisory roles, angel investing, helping others succeed. But sometimes they end up biting off more than they can chew, and they feel like they got a bunch of jobs now. And they're like, well, crap, I sold my business to get out of having a bunch of jobs and tasks and headaches, and I recreated that problem for me. I'd say another one is the philanthropist and the passion pursuer. So we see this quite often, entrepreneurs who want to sell and even do some good tax planning, funding their private operating foundation ahead of the transaction to mitigate some taxes. But sometimes it's just not the same itch of running a passion project or philanthropy versus running the business. And the last one I would say is the most common, but is the struggling seller, we'll call them that, right? Hey, I'm living the dream, man. I'm out golfing, travel, leisure, no clear purpose. And I think this is actually healthy to go into this state for the first 3-6 months and maybe not have an ideal plan, but know that, hey, what kind of do I want to do after I go through this sabbatical season of life? Because I do think there's something about recharging your batteries, but this is why mortality rate increases by 10x for the typical W-2 employee who then retires, because they just think they worked their entire life to retire, and then their first day of retirement, they're sitting on the couch watching TV, and probably maybe it feels great drinking a Bud Light at 12 o'clock. But then, day 30, day 60, day 90, it's like, well, what are we doing here? What's the purpose of life? So I think depression, relationship strain, health decline, all of that stuff is very practical for this struggling seller.
Yeah, and this is a huge part of just life in general. But really, what the components that I see for the really well-adjusted, happy post-exit entrepreneurs would be there has to be a component of doing stuff for someone other than you. So it could be something that you're doing for your kids or grandkids. It could be something you're doing for people who don't have your advantages that you're helping through charity or philanthropy. But there has to be a connection to people that you're helping that's nothing to do with you. And that's a critical piece. And then I think another piece is experiences, doing things you like with people you love. Because no one has a great time traveling Europe by themselves. It's best when you're with other people. And so doing things you like with people you love is a critical piece of that. And then I think also realizing how small you are as compared to the whole world. And how can you do that? Maybe I'm jumping ahead, but really Arthur Brooks talks about feeling small. And how do you do that? Awe of things like nature, things like art, music, worshiping the divine, whatever that means for you, whether it's just being amazed at the universe or your belief in God, whatever it is that makes you feel small and feel like there's something so much bigger than you actually is very healthy for your happiness.
Yep. I think very well said. And yeah, I can't agree more. So number 6 on this list of 8, money has its limits. And so here, this is, I think, something very common for entrepreneurs of just removing the goalpost of the original goal was sell and get 20 million or have 20 million liquid. Okay, sounds good. Let's unpack why that's the case, right? Is that actually necessary for the lifestyle you want to live and to lock in financial security based off your consumption, or is it ego driven, right? And then maybe once they get there, okay, now it's 100 million. Well, why, right? Is it really necessary or is it just ego? And, as you look at these billionaires, I think there's a lot of downside ramifications of happiness of then they get to that threshold and then they just move the goalposts. So then they never feel fulfilled or proud. And the other thing is like, at what cost? What is the cost of the relationships? If you're telling yourself this narrative of the story that I need X or I need Y, and you look at Gates and look at Bezos and look at all these billionaires that have their marriages, have blown up. And I think part of it is because, yes, they're so successful, so driven, but also maybe would their life have been better? Who knows? In an alternative universe where maybe they weren't as wealthy, but they were maybe a little bit more well-balanced and spent more time preserving and investing in those other key relationships in their life. So what are your thoughts on money and having its limits?
It definitely has its limits. I would be telling a falsehood if I didn't say that my life is better in many ways because I have money versus when I had no money. On the other hand, Lloyd Reeb, who's a friend of mine, he coaches a lot of very successful, very, very wealthy people. And what he likes to do on a first call with someone like that is he asks them for all their accomplishments, which the people he deals with are many. Huge accomplishments with money and with success and with prestige. And then when they finish all of that, he says, wow, you've accomplished a lot. What has that cost you? Think about that question. What has that cost you? And he told one famous story about a very successful CEO who had done all this. And when he asked him the question, the guy answered everything. Cost me my marriage, cost me my kids, cost me all these things. And so that's what you have to remember if you're chasing the money. You have to remember that all these other things that will cost you if you're not careful, you have to be aware of because money will do that to you. The other thing about money is great if you give it away, if you help others, and that actually is fulfilling. If it's just about you, then there's limits to the benefit. And then I'll just say one more thing on that. It's one of my favorite quotes from Oliver Wendell Holmes, which it will be maybe a little hard to decipher, but the quote is, I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I give my life for simplicity on the other side of complexity. And what that means to me is when I was a teacher, if you said, would you give anything to have a simpler life? I'd go, what are you talking about? I get a paycheck. I pay my mortgage. I have a little bit left over. My life is simple. There was nothing going on in my life, Mimi and I together. It was so simple. But then as you get wealthier and wealthier, you have more complexity. It naturally happens. And then you start to crave simplicity. And one other thing Lloyd told me is that a lot of these very wealthy people, they accumulate all these things that then create obligations and stress. And so he said they're very stressed out. And no one would understand this who doesn't have money. But they say, yeah, I'm stressed. Why are you stressed? Because I got 4 homes. I got 2 boats. I got my plane. There's always an insurance issue. There's something I'm dealing with. And it's just too much. I'm just completely stressed out. It's taken all my time. I have too much complexity in my life. And if you would have said that to me when I was a public school math teacher, I would have said, wow, yeah, too bad for you that you have 2 boats. But the truth is that's a reality. And that's one thing that I know Mimi and I are conscious of is 1 house, 2 cars. We don't need any of the fancy stuff that just creates problems. And often entrepreneurs do that as a status symbol to their friends so they can brag about their plane or brag about what they have. And you and I know entrepreneurs that don't have any money outside of those things that they own. And if you don't have money outside of those things, you don't have financial freedom. And if you don't have financial freedom, it doesn't feel very good jetting around in your private jet.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's go to number 7. Health is essential. And I think a line, I don't know who it gets attributed to, but a man with, a man with his health has 1,000 wishes or 1,000 dreams. A man without his health has 1.
Right.
And it's so true. And the finding here was that your health at age 50 predicts your happiness at age 80. And so that's why just being healthy is so important, just because mobility, flexibility, right? All of that stuff is dexterity. All of that is so important. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and this is something that I know that I've talked with you about, is just making sure that I'm prioritizing that and just making sure we're taking care of ourselves physically and mentally. But that way, that's really important just to stay in the game and to stay in the marathon and to stay in the race.
Yeah, if someone asked me at my age where I am, if they said, what would you tell me really simply are the keys to where you are today? I would say making sure I pay attention to my marriage and make sure I pay attention to my health. And as you know, really thanks to Mimi, because she was always into fitness and everything else, I work out 6 days a week. I'm pretty careful with my diet. I do all those things. And because of that, I just went back to U of A to see some friends I hadn't seen in 40 years. I'm stumbling over that number because it seems like a big number. And I was surprised at how many of them are just beaten down by life and are unhealthy. And I thought, boy, the energy and the light in their eyes is gone. And that can happen if you don't focus on the things that matter most, like your relationships and going after meaning and fulfillment and learning and growing and paying attention to your health. And by the way, it's easier to get your health in order when you're 30 if you haven't paid attention to it in 10 years versus 40, and 40 versus 50, and 50 versus 60. So it's never too late, but you want to start as soon as possible, because if you wait too long, it's very hard to get your body to respond and get back into a healthy position. But it's been one of the things I'm most grateful for is that I made that a priority in my life.
Yep. And we see tons of that in the entrepreneur space, huge investments into alternative in peptides, alternative medicines, et cetera. And I think that space is only going to grow because people are learning more and more about how important food and your intake and microbiome and all that is.
And there should be an end, because sometimes I meet entrepreneurs who they're not exercising, they're not doing the things that you need to do, and they're trying to take peptides and do all this stuff. It's like, yeah, do the stuff, the latest stuff, that's great, but also do the blocking and tackling, the simple things that will help you get you there. Don't ignore that, because the other stuff isn't going to save you if you're not doing the basics.
Yep. All right, last thing here, good news for everyone. It's never too late. So you can grow happiness at any age. And the study actually found that they were more happy and had more joy later in life. So the neuroplasticity continues throughout life. You can form new relationships, habits, purpose. So for an old dog like you, that's got to make you excited.
Very much so. Yeah, I do feel happier now than I did 10 years ago, and I hope to be happier 10 years from now. Just like anything, it takes intention and it takes work. You have to work at being happier, if that sounds crazy. And first step is knowing what makes you happy, which is what we're talking about today. So use these things and think about which of those areas could I be better. And if you focus on that and you make that better, you will be happier. I mean, the study is proof of that.
Yep. All right. Well, let's make this actionable for entrepreneurs. And I want to use the framework. We're going to throw this on the screen for those of you on YouTube and seeing this on Spotify. Make Rich Real. So this is the Make Rich Real framework and really the ultimate freedom to live life on your terms. And I love the way that this is framed up for all of our entrepreneur clients, is that making rich real is really the heart of what we're trying to accomplish within our fractional family office for the entrepreneur, for our client. And but the beautiful thing about it is that making rich real means so many different things to so many different people. It's custom. And so we've got a framework here where we have some of the different things that could be included in making rich real, whether it's financial security, right? We're also in financial services, family legacy. We see that all the time, personal growth, time freedom, charitable, life experiences. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of this comes down to meaning, purpose, values, impact, freedom, and legacy. So when we talk about make rich real, and as you're talking to entrepreneurs, what do they need to be taking away from this framework?
The first thing is, this isn't going to happen by accident. You have to realize and be cognizant of what does that mean to you? And it's going to take some time, some introspection, some conversations with the people you love. And I'd encourage you to have those conversations. So how much is it about charity? How much is it about your faith? How much is it about the multi-generations? How much is it about your own personal growth or your own time freedom, these different things that are put in here? How much is it about life experiences? I mean, if you think about it, it's the life experiences with the people you love that you remember, not the individual experiences, not scoring the highest total points on some video game. It's the experiences with people that you love that you do together. So which of these areas or what parts of all of them matter most to you? And then what you want to create your future self and then live into that future self. Because too often we get caught up with everything going on today, the stresses and what I need to do, but also take care of your future self, because you don't want to end up 5-10 years down the road and go, I missed out, or I didn't have the marriage I wanted, or I don't have the relationship with my kids, or I'm unhealthy, or my faith has been destroyed because I've ignored it. Whatever it might be, make sure that you pay attention to it and that you make it a part of today so that your future self thanks you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that creating a compelling vision for the life you want to live and why are you running this business, why are you doing all of these things you're doing is very important. And I think it's easy to just fall into the habit of day-to-day life and the monotony and just, I'm trying to grow just to grow and hire to hire and, just getting through life. But I think the most important piece of this is thinking about this and coming up with this compelling vision, especially as a couple, if you're married, and like, what are we actually trying to do?
Yeah.
Where are we actually trying to go and grow or do? And then let's, like you said, reverse engineer into a plan or into a strategy or tactics or tasks in order to actually achieve this. And so I think that's the most important thing that's missing. And when I talk with entrepreneurs, sometimes it's like, oh, I want to give money to my kids, or, oh, I want to save taxes, or I want to, be have XX dollars in my bank account, or buy a mountain house, or buy an airplane. But it's like, but why? Why? Like, what's the why behind all of these things? And maybe at the beginning it's ego. Maybe at the beginning it's just keeping up with the Joneses. Maybe it's something that they're trying to repair from their childhood. But I think the deeper and deeper you go, that's where it's like, well, what is our true why of why are we doing all of this? And I think that until you understand that, like, just wealth creation and wealth building is just superficial, and it's just not a game that's as fun or worth playing.
The other thing I would say is having what you want instead of wanting what you have. So in other words, a lot of times I'll meet entrepreneurs who they say, if I have $100 million exit, then I'm going to be happy. And what they find out is they never end up happy because of the thing that happens, because happiness is not about that. Happiness is part of the journey. And so really wanting what you have, appreciating what you have, being grateful for what you have, and being happy at your current place will make you in a much better position. So if those things happen, or if they don't happen, you're going to be happy 10 years from now because you're taking care of all these other things that matter. And one thing that matters to me is my marriage. And I know Mimi and I have a great marriage, but we heard this couple speak, JV and Carlita. They work in the John Maxwell organization at an event. They spoke and they talked about how they do these marriage retreats once a year. And so last year we did our first marriage retreat. We're going to have our second marriage retreat, which is just the two of us doing like a staycation at a hotel in town and doing a little agenda and talking through our wants and needs and what's working well and what's not. But it's just 2 or 3 days, the same way we do business planning, where we carve off time to do business planning and think about what do we want this to look like in the future. But we realized we don't really do that with our marriage. With our marriage, we just kind of let it go, and it works because we love each other and we care and we want to make it work. But being more intentional about, let's actually do a couple days of planning. Now, we don't plan the whole time. You goof off and you have time and you connect. But it's been really good. This is our second year doing it. And that's the type of thing that I want to encourage anyone who's listening. If there's a part that you want to improve, think about what you can do to make it more intentional. And that's the marriage retreat's been good for us.
I like that. And kind of our version of that is having a young family. Every single Tuesday night, we've got a babysitter and we have date night. So every single Tuesday, we got the same babysitter. We go on date night, and it's intentional time for us just to be intentional with each other. No phones, no kids, nothing. And that was something that we definitely needed, because after having kids, right, like your entire world revolves around the business or the kids, and you need more intentional time. So
that's really smart.
Yeah.
And now you got us. We're doing once a quarter babysitting.
Let's go. And you guys are free.
Yeah, we're free. Yeah, that's true. I never even thought about that. You mentioned that, and I thought, oh, I should be charging for this.
You should. Yeah, well, I'll leave you some pizza money. A little beer money.
That's okay. No, I want to know those kids as they grow up, so that when they're older, I can give them a hard time and take their phones away at dinner if you're not smart enough to take their phones away.
I love it. I love it. All right. That's all we got today, Jim, for the Make Rich Real podcast, and hence the naming of the Make Rich Real podcast. It's from this Make Rich Real framework that we just talked about. So that being said, we wrap up every episode. Biggest takeaways, hit us.
Mine will be on the happiness piece. And I think of what Arthur Brooks said, and he said that the world tells you to love things, use people, and it's all about you. The truth is, if you want to be happy, love people, use things, and worship the divine.
That's very well said. And I hate to say it, but this is the second podcast in a row where I'm going to agree with you at Stealing with Thunder that I think at the end of the day, this is something I've been much more intentional about, I think, since I've had kids, and since there's been more stuff on my plate of what are my goals, what exactly am I trying to achieve, and why, and then really looking at where am I allocating my time, my energy, my mental thought cycles. And so I think, like, thinking with the end in mind and making Rich real and this happiness study, this is what it's all about, right? Because you can have all those different superficial things, or have the money, or have the status, but at the end of the day, it's like you said, no one on their deathbed says, man, I wish I worked those extra hours, or man, I wish I stacked an extra few $1,000,000, or they're going to think of the family, the relationships, the experiences. That's what they're going to want more of as they're like seeing their eyes flash before their eyes.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a great job. I mean, at your age, I wasn't nearly as thoughtful about you are about my life and what I was doing and why I was doing it. So that puts you way ahead of the game. So I admire that about you.
I appreciate it. Awesome. All right, that's it for this episode. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys back in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening to the Make Rich Real podcast, where $1 million businesses meet billionaire strategies. Please note the following disclosure. This podcast is provided by Do Wealth Management, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and should not be construed as personalized investment advice, tax advice, or legal advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Nothing discussed in this podcast constitutes a solicitation or offer to provide investment advisory services to any person in any jurisdiction where such solicitation or offer would be unlawful under the securities law of such jurisdiction. All information presented is believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed for accuracy or completeness. All investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance, if mentioned, is not indicative of future results, and no investment strategy can guarantee profit or loss. Any mention of specific securities, investment strategies, or market performance is for illustrative purposes only and should not be considered a recommendation. Economic and market conditions are subject to change, and any opinions expressed are currently only as of the date of this recording. Before making any investment decisions, please consult with a qualified financial professional who can assess your individual circumstances, risk tolerance, and investment objectives. For more information about our services and fees, please refer to our ADV Part 2A, which is available at our website, dowealth.com, or upon request.